So, page 44 there. Okay, number one, this is your headstock. Your headstock. This has the motor and actually does the power and turns your piece of wood. So the headstock. The headstock. Number two, hand wheel. Hand wheel. This is your hand wheel. You can rotate it. That way you can rotate your stock, make sure everything's lined up and not hit anything. So your hand wheel. Number three, speed control. It's also your on-off switch. Speed control. So you move the lever, it comes on, and you can increase the speed from there. I'll show you guys that in a moment. Number four is the banjo, which is this part right here. On this machine it's red, the others are all color-coded, but this is your banjo. Number four, banjo. An extra sawdust. Number four is the banjo. Number four holds number five. Number five is your tool rest. Your tool rest. And this is actually where your turning tools will sit on this while you work. Okay? So number five, tool rest. Six is your tailstock. This is your tailstock. It supports the stock on the back side. Okay, so your tailstock, number six. Number seven is what the banjo and the tailstock sits on, and this is the lathe bed. The lathe bed. The lathe bed. Lathe bed. And finally, number eight is your guard on here. So, number eight is the guard. Any repeats on those? Good. Okay, excellent. Excellent. Okay, on the lathe. You got to wear your safety glasses no matter what when you're in here. For number one, always wear a face shield and eye protection when operating the lathe. Always wear a face shield and eye protection when operating the lathe. So, I got face shields with each lathe there, so make sure you have your safety glasses on and a face shield. And for even more safety, you also have a guard. Okay? It seems a little overkill, but I had a young man probably 10 years ago, had a board come off the lathe, struck him in the face. All he had on was the safety glasses, and it really messed up his mouth. I mean, he had to have 11 hours of surgery to get that fixed up. Okay? So, not a pleasant experience. Had he had his face shield on, I think he still would have been injured, but not nearly as severe. Okay? So, make sure you have the face shield, guard, and safety glasses. Yes, you'll see people on YouTube maybe not even have a pair of safety glasses on using a lathe. That's really, really a bad idea. Okay? Make sure you do that. Remember, if there's a problem and the wood comes off, it's rotating towards you. The wood is coming at you. Okay? And it's not going to be a little bit of sawdust. It could definitely be a whole big chunk of wood there. So make sure you wear a face shield and your safety glasses. Number two, remove or fasten any loose clothing or jewelry and roll long sleeves above your elbows. Tie long hair up and back. So remove or fasten any loose clothing. The lathe rotating. If you get anything caught in there, your sleeves, necktie, jewelry, rings, if you got a big class ring and it gets caught in there, it's going to definitely hurt a lot when it comes off. So make sure loose clothing, anything like that, take it off, put it away. I take my watch off. A, I don't want to get caught. B, I don't want sawdust all put in there. Okay? And I will wear, just to keep the sawdust off of me, a tight fitting light jacket here. So it makes it a little bit easier. Number three, keep the floor where you're standing clear of chips to provide good footing. So keep the floor clear of chips. You don't really make too much sawdust. You make a lot of saw chips in there, larger chips there. But make sure the floor gets clear to that because it will get slick. Number four, make sure the stock is free from checks, loose knots, or other defects. Make sure the stock is free from checks, loose knots, and other defects. A check is a crack in the wood. And I thought I saw one on here, but I think it's more of the grain. So if there's a crack in your board, and it's rotating, you have that centrifugal force applying stress to the wood, and you're also turning it, you're cutting the wood, and if you get a little aggressive, those cracks can get bigger and pieces come flying off at you, or your whole project comes off the lathe. So make sure there's no cracks or splits or big knots or any problems with your stock. It can be very dangerous. Number 5, make sure the stock is correctly mounted on the lathe. Make sure the stock is correctly mounted on the lathe. I'll show you that right now. Make sure the stock is correctly mounted. Okay, several ways to mount the stock on here. One is what they call spindle turning, is where you put it between these two centers. You've got this right here, it's a little spur bit. It's called a live center. And then you have a dead center over here. This one happens to have a bearing on it. And what you want to do, and this is true for about anything you mount on the lathe, you want to hook it up to the center. Make sure you throw it on the floor. You want to hook it up to the center of the board, okay? Because everything runs off the center axis of your project. So when I have this put on here, if the banjo wants to cooperate, when I put it on here, I want it to be on the center. A couple ways to find the center on the end. You can measure it, but another easy way is to just draw an X from corner to corner. And you're going to do this when you make pins, pretty much anything else. Just draw an X from corner to corner. So if your board is not quite square, or maybe one of the edges is a little messed up, it's still pretty simple to find the center of your project. So just draw an X corner to corner, like so. There's a nice clean end, okay? So just draw an X from corner to corner, like that. Take your live center here, it's got a little point and some spurs. You're gonna put that point right in the X, get you a hammer, and drive it in there just enough to get those spurs to bite into the wood. Please don't do it on the lathe or the table saw. Instead, bend at the knees there, put it on the floor, and give it a few love taps just to get that bit, those spurs right there to dig in. And if it falls off, no big deal. You have an indentation in there for it to grab a hold of. So if you look at the end of a baseball bat, and you see that little star shape, that's what they've done, or whatever project. So get that to bite in. Your other end, dead center down here, use it just to go right in that X. And right there. Almost. There. Tighten down the nut here. The back of the tailstock here, you have a lever. As you rotate this, arm comes out and pushes it, kind of compresses the two centers together. So if you're working with it, it starts to get loose. You kind of hear a little vibration. You can hear that. A little bit loose there. Just tighten it back up, okay? It is possible to put a lot of pressure. If you got a small project, you can actually crack it. So don't put way too much pressure on it, but put a little bit on there, okay? So make sure the stock is correctly mounted on the lathe. All right, number 6, for faceplate turning. For faceplate turning, you use a faceplate for turning bowls and other objects where you can't use the tailstock. You carefully select the screws used to secure the work. The screws must be the proper size. And I'll show you guys, I got special screws for that when we're ready to do something like that. Number 7, just like true in life, make sure all screws are tight and check them occasionally. Number 7, make sure all screws are tight, check them occasionally. Remember, if the screws come loose and there's a problem, where's that board going? At you. Okay, so make sure everything's mounted down properly. Number 8, make adjustments to the tool rest only when the lathe is at a complete stop. So make adjustments only when the lathe is at a complete stop to the tool rest. So it is possible, if you were making a bowl or something like that, that you could have several hours of time invested in your project before you even mount it to the lathe. Once you mount it on here, you don't want to mess it up. So when you move your tool rest, make sure the lathe is off, because it's possible to hit your project with the tool rest and knock it off the lathe if it was rotating. So make sure it's off. Okay, so I'm going to put my tool rest close, lock down the banjo, lock down the tool rest. Okay. Number 9, keep the tool rest as close as reasonably possible to the stock, no more than 1/8 of an inch. So I get the tool rest as about 1/8 of an inch away from my stock, as close as I can get it, by frequently stopping the lathe and adjusting the tool rest. So right now I got it set up on my corner here. I'm about 1/8 of an inch away. Get it as close as you can. As you turn, this block of wood is going to get smaller diameter. I need to stop, move the tool rest closer. Mainly for safety reasons, and you get a lot cleaner cut when your tool rest is closer. You don't get a lot of vibration from your tool. Number 10, adjust the tool rest height so the cutting edge of the tool is at or just below center. Just below center. Never more than 1/8 of an inch below center. So if you look down the wood and you imagine an imaginary line drawn on there, that's your center line, make sure your tool rest is at or just below that center line, so that your tools, your cutting edge there, is going to be right at that center line or just below it. If you're really high, it's not going to cut very efficient. If you're really low, it may not even cut at all. So be careful with that. Make sure you're close to that center line. Repeats in the first 10? No? Good. Number 11. This is a very important habit to get into. Before turning on the lathe, rotate the stock at least 1 full revolution by hand to make sure it clears the tool rest and all of the parts. So remember, before turning on the lathe, rotate at least 1 full revolution. Okay? And try to get in the habit of doing that all the time, because even the other day I had it set up, I bumped it, I guess, a little bit. I checked, and sure enough, the stock hit my tool rest. So you don't want to turn the lathe on, the stock hit the tool rest, come flying off at you first thing. So make sure you rotate it so it's not hitting the tool rest or anything else that happens to be around it. Number 12. Always hold the turning tool firmly against the tool rest with both hands. Hold it firmly with both hands. So when you put your turning tool on the tool rest, you want to have a good grip. So what I recommend, first thing, get your feet shoulder width apart, no weird stance so you're off balance. Get a good grip on it, okay? And you'll notice some of them have really long handles. I take that extra handle and tuck it underneath my arm, forearm there, tuck that up against my ribs. So I'm using my body to help stabilize your tool. Your other hand, in this case left hand, you can put it on top, like so. If I'm doing a lot of rough end work, just getting the corners knocked off, I'll put it on top. And then when I do my fine detail work, I'll put my thumb on here, okay? And you can do it right or left-handed, doesn't matter, okay? You want to get a good grip on this tool, then you'll set it on the tool rest and then gently ease it into the workpiece until it starts to cut. And I'll show you that momentarily. So make sure you have both hands. Don't be out here running it, one hand or something like that. It can catch the tool and kick it out of your hand, so be very careful with that. 13. Remove the tool rest when sanding, polishing, and finishing the project. Remove the tool rest when sanding and polishing. We'll talk about sanding in a moment. You're going to sand on the top side. If the sandpaper catches, you don't want your finger caught between the tool rest and the project. So just remove the tool rest when doing your sanding. And sanding is not nearly as bad on the lathe as it is on other projects. It's actually kind of fun. 15. Use a tailstock whenever possible. Use a tailstock with a bearing center whenever possible. Okay, all the ones we have a bearing in here. You can get them that don't have a bearing. Problem is, it just heats up the wood quite a bit. They still work, but it's not nearly as nice and quality of a product. 16. Adjust the tailstock center so the point is firmly embedded in the stock without impeding free rotation. So adjust the tailstock center so the point is firmly embedded in the stock. Oh, I'm already hitting the tool rest. Yeah, I guess I bumped it. All right, good thing we could check that. So adjust the tailstock so the center is firmly embedded. 17. This is a very important aspect. Operate the lathe at a slow speed when beginning any turning. So 17, operate the lathe at a slow speed when starting out. When you turn the lathe on, you're just going to gently move the lever until it kicks on, and it'll kick on right about 1,000 RPMs. Turn your project when it gets balanced, smaller diameter, then you can increase the speed for turning and sanding, what have you. But you want to start out really slow in case something's wrong, it's out of balance, it's like that. Go slow, that way if it comes off, better chance it's not going to hit you. If you crank it up really fast, that means it's going to come off the lathe and hit you really fast and hard. Okay, so operate the lathe at a slow speed when you first start out. 18, if the lathe vibrates, it is running too fast or the stock is not properly secured. So 18, if the lathe vibrates, it is running too fast or the stock is not properly secured. So, I'll take the tool rest off. I'll show you guys in just a second. 19, the speed selector on a variable speed lathe must be operated only while the lathe is turning. So the speed selector, the way it works, the lathe has to be on and then you can increase the speed. I'll show you that in just a quick second here. 20, now this is probably one of the most important habits to get into. 20, stand to the side when starting the lathe. Stand to the side when starting the lathe. Doesn't matter which side, just stand to the side. So I got my stock mounted. I like it, feels pretty firm. I took my tool rest off for what I'm going to do here, show you this starting out. But when you first start it, step off to the side, gently turn the handle until it kicks on. If you notice, pretty well balanced, it's not shaking like crazy. Kind of got that hazy line out here on the outside. That is those corners coming around. And as you turn it, that hazy line will become more distinct when you come to the final shape of the project. Okay? Notice how it was all balanced, it wasn't wobbling and having problems. I'm going to move the tailstock over a little bit and cause it to wobble. It's actually what they call offset turning, and you can do it and create some really neat projects. I have tried. They didn't turn out like I thought they would, but it's a different process. But watch out here on this end when I kick this thing on. Notice how it's wobbling all over the place? Alright. If that happens, just shut it off, let it stop, take a look at it, see what you did wrong. It may be you didn't find the center properly or something shifted. Okay? We'll put it back in the center. Nice and balanced, right? "21. I had a bad habit of this for years. Do not touch stock with your hands while it is rotating. Do not touch stock with your hands while it is rotating. It's like this hypnotic stance there. It's rotating, it's looking really nice, and you want to touch it. Please don't do that with your bare hands there. You can get seriously injured if your fingers get caught or a ring gets caught, bracelet. So make sure you don't get in the habit of touching it while it's rotating. 22, keep your tools sharp since dull tools are harder to control and leave a rough work surface. So keep your tools sharp since dull tools are hard to control. If tool's not sharp, come see me. I will gladly sharpen it up there for you, and later on I'll show you guys how to sharpen your own tools. But make sure they're nice and sharp. It works better, it's just more of a joy to use, and it's a lot safer. So make sure they are sharp. 23, stop the lathe to make measurements, tape measure, ruler, or whatever, and also measurements with calipers. Inside or outside calipers, doesn't matter. So you want to stop the lathe before making measurements or making measurements with calipers. A lot of times when it's running, people will try to get the outside dimensions with outside calipers. They put them on there and the calipers would get caught and get all twisted up like little pretzels. So a lot of calipers, a lot of outside calipers gave their life prematurely because people wouldn't stop the lathe when they were checking. So make sure you stop the lathe checking with calipers. 24. Sand and polish only on the top side of the work. And I will show you that later, but you only sand and polish on the top side. Don't put your hand underneath, because it'll pull your fingers in there and definitely do some damage to your thumb if you're not careful. So you want to sand and polish on the top side of the work. 25, when possible, cut faceplate stock round on the bandsaw before mounting. Cut faceplate stock round on the bandsaw. So instead of having big corners, big square corners, you want to cut those off on the bandsaw. It's nice anytime you can cut these corners off, starting out to ruin. Okay. 26. Allow glued stock or mounting blocks to cure at least 24 hours before turning. So this white oak has been glued up. I know it's been cured for more than 24 hours, but you want to make sure to let that glue dry real well. If it doesn't fully cure, if you glue it up and give it 20 minutes and come trying to turn it, if it comes apart, where's it going? At you. So you don't want this thing come flying at you because the glue didn't set up. Remember, there's a lot of stress on this, a lot of centrifugal force, and a lot of stress with the tools, so make sure that glue dries very well. 27. On faceplate turning, keep an accurate check on cutting depth to avoid striking the mounting screws. So on your faceplate, you put screws from the back side, and you can hit those with your tools if you're not careful.